Hi guys, and welcome to this week's video. Sorry I didn't upload last week. I had my first university exam and then was ill at the most inconvenient time, so I wasn't able to get anything recorded. So apologies for that, and thank you for being patient. But anyway, in today's video I'll be talking about art style, and I'll be showing you the process of a tiger in monochrome coloured pencil on toned paper. I've been itching to try this method out again after drawing a wolf in the same way a while ago, and link to that will be in the cards and the description box down below, of course. So first of all, what is style? I see style being used in art in two contexts. The first is a broad category of art that defines basic and defining features, so that you can group similar pieces by different artists together, like Impressionism or manga or realism. The second context, which is the one I'll be mainly talking about today, and the one I think most people here are preoccupied with, is that style means the defining traits in a piece of art that makes it recognisably belong to a particular individual. I'm sure you've seen people ask this question, or perhaps you've asked it yourself or been asked. How did you find your style? And often the true meaning behind this question is, how do I find my style? I see a lot of newer artists and teen artists in particular ask this question. And it's a perfectly understandable question to ask. You want to know how to create art that feels like it belongs to you, that is consistently recognisable, and a form of true self-expression. I think the reason why many teens ask might be because of that teenage years can be tough, because you're trying to figure out your own identity, and the style question is closely related to that. You want to be a unique and recognisably different individual, and there's nothing wrong with that. We all need to have a sense of identity and belonging. So continuing on with this train of thought, in life, your character, so who you are as an individual, is created through your experiences and your reactions to those experiences. And it's just the same in art, so how you draw naturally without consciously trying to emulate another person's style, aka your true style, is created through your artistic experiences and reflection upon them. So in short, the fastest way to discover your style is to practice and experience a lot and reflect back on your work. See what methods you like to employ and how you prefer your outcomes to look. You'll only know what your preferred method of creating is if you've tried lots of different ways before coming to a conclusion. Experimenting and trying different mediums, techniques, and emulating other artists' styles is all really important. Sometimes experiences can be relevant in unexpected ways. So for example, even if you tried a medium but don't feel like you'll use it again, the techniques and approach you might have learned could be applicable elsewhere. But I know, being told to just practice is one of the most frustrating things to hear. You want to know your style now and to be comfortable knowing that you have some form of constant. When I drew as a hobby in my teens, and early last year when I got back into art, few things were more infuriating than, firstly, having no idea what direction I wanted to go in, and secondly, drawing two pictures and them looking like two different people drew them. But don't get caught thinking that style is an end goal, that when you reach you're set for life. Just like skill level, your goal now is probably not going to be the same goal that you have in the future, or when you've reached this current goal. So even if you feel that you already have a style, it'll still be developing and taking you new places, just perhaps the changes will be more subtle than they were in the beginning. And of course you can always start developing other styles too. A style can be built up of many things. The most obvious one is how you draw or simplify a certain object. This is particularly true for illustrators, cartoonists, and manga artists. Eyes, for example, are simplified and used all the time, and often become a symbol of a particular artist's style. But there are plenty of other things. Medium, of course, we associate some artists with certain mediums. Colour palette and colour choice, how you limit what colours you use or how you include colours together. Lighting. I can think of artists who like to use glow effects in their work and others who prefer harsh contrasts. Subject matter is another one. You guys probably associate me with drawing lots of animals, and I'd say that's an integral part of who I am as an artist, or my style. Application of the medium, blending, line quality, I mean the list is endless. Basically any quality you could describe in a piece can be considered a stylistic choice. And that's the beauty of it. Style is built up of so many different factors that contribute to the outcome. You can pick and choose elements or change elements entirely and it still could be recognisably a piece of your work because the underlying majority is still there. Even if it's a different form entirely, it might still bear your artistic fingerprint. The more you work, the more familiar you'll become with your tools and the skills behind drawing. Amongst other things, style is a steady method behind your application and the techniques you like using. So here's something that might be a shocker if you're worried about not having a style. You probably already have a style if you've been drawing a lot. Sometimes it just takes time to be able to see it for yourself. I like to think that style is a bit like an accent. Not many people like to think that they have an accent because what they hear is normal to them. And you only begin to realise that you have an accent when you start to hear other people's different accents, and the obvious differences between the way you talk and perhaps the more subtle ones. A bit of a sidetrack, I just want to give realism a little defence here. I think lots of people get caught up prioritising how they can draw differently from other people, and they'll write realism off entirely because realism is the absence of style, or vanilla drawing, which for the record I do not agree with at all. It's easy to think of style only belonging to cartooning, because simplification and exaggeration in anatomy opens up more opportunity for stylistic choice. But it's important to note that there are many styles within realism. Even if you compare realistic pet portrait artists, you'll see that their end results will look very different. Even with the constraint of having to copy what you see, the differences in an individual's perception and their application of their medium will result in obvious style. Like I mentioned before, there are so many factors that contribute to style. So let's talk a bit about consistency. Having drawings that look to you like two entirely different people made them is not always a bad thing. Once again, reflect. Which techniques did you use for each picture? Which methods did you prefer? And which outcome do you prefer? I also recommend writing these things down in your sketchbook or art diary, as it can be handy to keep track of your likes and dislikes and other useful bits of information. And making something that feels like a step in the opposite direction isn't a negative, it means you now know what not to do. But I can understand that it can feel a bit soul-crushing and the end of the world if you've put a lot of yourself into something that you don't like or don't feel expresses you. Something I struggled to remember when starting out was that there will always be a next time. You can always draw that thing again. If you enjoy drawing, you'll be creating art for a long time ahead. You have thousands of drawings ahead of you, so don't worry if this one didn't turn out. You'll have plenty in the future that will. Another aspect of consistency is simply observational skill. For example, if you draw the same person twice but they look like different people when comparing the two drawings, that's okay. Consistency is tough, especially for faces, as we are so finely tuned to detect subtle differences. So improve your observational skills through dedicated practice and learn methods to check your drawing. I've already made a video on the techniques I use to improve accuracy in my drawing, so I'll leave the link to that in the description box down below and in the cards. Artistic direction can be a hard choice to make too. So describing my own experience with this, it's only relatively recently where I've been pretty set on only making realistic work. Last year, when I changed art from a hobby into a lifestyle, I was exploring things like character design and illustration, but I practiced drawing realistic animals more, so I quickly became better at that area than drawing cartoons. And this snowballed until I didn't really want to show much of my non-realistic stuff on my social media, because I didn't want to confuse people as to what I stood for as an artist, because those people had started following me because of my realistic work. I also had the extra incentive to continue working hard on my realistic animal art as people began to commission me. I wouldn't recommend developing a style purely because you think it's profitable, but realistically speaking, money is a motivator for a lot of people, and it might end up being the decision maker. Just remember to enjoy what you're doing though, no matter what. As for using inspiration, I really recommend getting inspired by other artists' work. I would avoid focusing on just one artist though, as I think this increases the risk of you becoming an emulation of them rather than creating your own individual expression. Find elements of other artists' styles, pick and choose what you like best and adapt them for your own use. Watching tutorials is really helpful as techniques are incredibly adaptable rather than trying to adapt somebody's outcome. So to finish up the video, I'm doing a quick Q&A round. You can submit questions to me on my Discord chat server, link to that is down below, and I'll usually give a heads up on what the topic will be a few days before making the video go live. As always, these opinions are my own and are certainly not necessarily the right or only answer to the questions, so I'd love to know what responses you guys have to these questions too in the comment section down below. So the first question comes from Jerkules, and she asks, how can you get more comfortable drawing in your own style? She went on to clarify that she feels uncomfortable unless she draws realism, and that she wants to draw in a more stylized, less realistic way, perhaps semi-realism. This is a brilliant question, and I think this is something a lot of people experience. From what I've seen, art at school tends to be geared towards realism, and teachers and adults in general tend to be more approving of realistic work over cartoons. So it can be really hard to break away from that. First off, unfortunately, it comes back to practice. Try things out and keep drawing the way you prefer to draw. When you practice and experiment, you're not only improving your drawing skills, you're also getting used to the feeling of being out of your comfort zone. It's always intimidating starting off and trying something new. I know the feeling well. You feel a bit out of control, you don't really know what you're doing, but it gets easier, I promise. If you like drawing realism, continue drawing realism. No matter what, you'll develop your own style just through drawing, whether your style is your own interpretation of realism, or if you end up adapting it and exaggerating elements to form the semi-realism goal that you wanted. Practicing realism will set you up excellently for any sort of illustration or cartooning work. I think observational skills are best practiced when drawing exactly what you see. And moreover, building up a knowledge and understanding of anatomy, amongst other things, will really boost your ability to know how to draw semi-realism or stylized characters and make them look convincing. Maybe try having a sketchbook for each of your styles, that way you have a dedicated area to practice them both and not feel guilty that you're doing one but not the other. The next question is from Berryzem, who writes, do you think everyone has a style from the time they start drawing? Another brilliantly thought-provoking question. By my definition of style at least, which is knowing a particular way that you like to draw, isn't present until you've been doing enough art to know your own set of relatively constant preferences. But I want to follow this up by saying that I think everybody has their own way of seeing the world, and their own set of experiences, and this on its own can contribute to an early form of style, and something that might be a continuing theme in their art indefinitely. And the last question comes from Mo-Moomy, and she asks, how closely do you work from a reference in order to convey your style? And on a similar note, how do you make realistic anatomy your style? So I try to copy the reference exactly in terms of line and shape in order to correctly replicate the subject's anatomy, and I'll use a few different ways to check my accuracy as I go, And similarly, I won't change shadows and highlights either, as these are all incredibly important in depicting form. But what I do adjust is level of contrast, saturation and focus compared to the reference photo, and I'll choose to leave out details in less important areas to keep the viewer's eye drawn where I want it. I also don't copy every single detail exactly. For example, I don't copy line for line every strand of fur, but I take the gist of what I see, say for example the general direction and length. In this sense, I have a sort of painterly and impressionistic result. I draw the reference in the way that I see it, or that I want to see it, and try and accentuate the things that I find most beautiful in the image. But style is not something that I think about when I draw. I just draw what I perceive and use my usual methods of colouring to build up the drawing. So that concludes this video, and here's the finished piece. Thank you guys for sticking through to the end, and I hope that you liked it and found it interesting. If you did, please leave it a thumbs up, it really helps me out. If you'd like me to make a monochrome tutorial, let me know, or if you have any other video ideas, please leave your suggestions in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to keep up to date with more arty videos. Thanks again for watching, have a lovely week, and I'll see you in the next video.